Tenant asking landlord, me, to be more professional. I am a small-time landlord, with just 4 tenants. Earlier this year, I had 2 sisters that didn't respond to my requests to add of the gal's husband to the lease, though he was living with them. Not a big deal. But did I mention the pit bull they also brought home, without permission? I do allow pets, and had previously approved their other dog. I asked nicely in person and by email in the months leading up to the malicious compliance. They also did not respond when I asked if they were happy there, and wanted to renew their lease for the following year. I asked again. Then I emailed them notice that I would start showing the unit 2 days later. I try to be a nice landlord. I do. They had a newborn, as well, so I scheduled all of the showings within a 2-hour window on the same night so I could be in their space as little as possible. Also, because they had not responded, and it was now serious crunch time for getting another tenant and my spouse worked all the following 2 weeks during evening showing hours, I had the delightful inconvenience of bringing my 2- and 6-year-old children with me to the showings. Because I'm not a corporation. I'm a small-time family landlord with kids. Try to imagine how difficult it is to conduct business meetings with 2 kids, right? Then imagine staggering showings every 15 minutes, with prospective tenants who are also bringing their own kids. Just to further clutter your imagination, this is an 800 square foot 2-bedroom apartment with a cozy entryway. So I arrive with my 2 kids, to find that my tenants are still at home, along with the husband, the newborn and the other sister's boyfriend. So that's 7 people in a small kitchen already. Then the first prospective tenants start arriving, husbands, wives, with kids, and some showing up early so there's 2 sets of them. That's 14 people in a small kitchen. And I'm a mom. I have magical powers. So I'm holding my toddler, my daughter is safely under the dining table coloring, and I'm chatting with the prospective tenants and directing traffic while my actual tenants prepare to depart. If you didn't know this already, it's common practice in the US to leave the premises during real estate or apartment showings. This was their first apartment, so I actually emailed them ahead of time to let them know what is generally expected at showings, e.g., a relatively tidy apartment, and that they can leave, for their own convenience. They do eventually leave, after the boyfriend tells a prospective tenant that he, in fact, also lives there, and I carry on with an exhausting scheduling of showings, and have my new tenants all picked out and lease signed by the next day. Awesome, right? The next night, I get a voicemail from the husband, who is not my tenant. I saved it, and just listened to it again, because it still gives me that same delightful shiver of malicious compliance. In his voicemail, he told me how awful it was that my children touched his infant's things. They didn't, because I keep my kids entertained with magical mommy toys, but prospective tenants also brought children, and how they had to sterilize everything to keep their infant from being sick, and how inconvenient it was to have showings with only 2 days' notice, and how very unprofessional I was to bring my children, and asked if I could just be more professional in the future. You can hear it, can't you? The deep shiver of malicious compliance vibrating through my offended being. The next morning, I started issuing professional lease violation notices, one for the extra residents of the unit, hubby and boyfriend, one for the extra dog, and a few additional ones for building concerns I noted during the showings. They ignored the violation notice, which I sent by certified mail and, thoughtfully, also by email. I decided to be even more professional 30 days later, and issue a 5-day notice to vacate, and I called their mom, who is their emergency contact, as an eviction notice is an emergency. Did I mention that their lease was due to end just a few weeks later? But it would be unprofessional of me to let these violations slide until then. 3 days later, they'd magically sent me all the information I'd requested, removed the other dog, licensed the first dog, gotten the required pet insurance. They moved out on their lease termination date, and skipped out on their last electric bill, and left the unit in damaged condition. Despite my professional security deposit disposition statement and request for payment, they ignored those notices, until I stated I would proceed to small claims court by X date for the total due beyond their security deposit. On X date, they replied stating they didn't think it was fair that they should have to cover damages to the unit, or pay any more money toward their utility bill. Yep. 2 months later, there we were in the lobby of the courthouse, sitting across from each other on uncomfortable waiting room benches. They're laughing among themselves about how they're going to get their full security deposit back, and I'm quietly reviewing my presentation notes to the judge and my sizable stack of evidence, photographs, videos. This was my first time in court, but I wasn't laughing. I was preparing. 1 hour later, we're back in the lobby and their mom is trying to write me a check for the full amount of the judgment. She doesn't have a pen. Her kids don't have a pen. I, however, have a pen. I cheerfully offer my pen. She writes the check and hands it to me, and... wait. I hold out my hand again. Got my pen back too. I was so proud of myself for not saying any of the sassy things in my head in that moment. You know why? Because I was being professional, as I'd been from the moment he'd left that voicemail. As a last note, I do acknowledge that it would have been better if I hadn't brought my children. However, if you have kids, you'll understand that sometimes, they simply have to go where you go.
Now to the comments. This reminds me of my MC story. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, was moving in with me. Her landlord decided to get cute with the deposit refund, cute in a sexist way with the types of allegations. My GF had the carpets and the whole place professionally cleaned while it was empty. She'd lived there for 3 or 4 years and the place hadn't been painted or recarpeted in twice that time, so there was normal wear and tear just on the paint. Landlord decides to deduct most of the security deposit and send her a check for about $300 of about a $2,500 deposit. About a week after move-out date, landlord is cheap and send the response and check regular mail. I tell GF don't deposit and wait. She wanted to call him. I told her don't do that and trust me on this one. At 30 days from move-out date I have a copy of the landlord-tenant laws in my state regarding deposits in a letter, sent certified. I proceed to tell him he's in violation of state laws and if he'd like to make a claim he can do so in small claims court after refunding the entire deposit. State law says that all deposit-related correspondence must be in certified mail. State law also says he must pay our attorney fees if he's in violation. A week later she gets a check with the full deposit and not another word said.
Had a similar thing happen. The house we had been renting had a leaky roof, so we were always calling the landlord about leaks and water damage and taking pictures. We move out and no deposit because of damage to the walls, so we let him know that he is violating tenant laws and we're willing to have the court settle this. A few days later we get our deposit back, I think $50 less because cleaning fees, but at that point wasn't worth it.
Never call the landlord about repairs/issues. In writing, certified mail, return receipt is the official way under most leases. One of my kids had to have this point hammered into their thick skull by spending a cold winter in a poorly heated, drafty apartment that they called about repeatedly. When they sent a certified letter, stuff magically got fixed. Absolutely delicious malicious compliance.
This ended well. I know cases where the landlord lost even though the damage exceeded the deposit.
OP replied, yes. I was prepared to lose. It was my first time in court, and while I was uber prepared with photos and documentation, I was still aware that I could certainly lose. But now I'm better educated and better prepared, and I also didn't go into it filing for frivolous things or damages that were clearly or potentially normal wear and tear. I suspect a lot of landlords try to claim for wear and tear, and in my state, that's extremely frowned upon and just isn't ethical. Of course walls get dingy over time, and carpets get worn. If only there was an exact definition for the gray area stuff. It's interesting if you consider how all these small things you'd normally let slide really add up if you decide to go by the book.
OP replied. Absolutely, exactly. I have another tenant moving out now where we'll also end up in court, unfortunately, and I'm photographing and noting every single thing that is an allowable repair, as well as my time spent repairing / cleaning / supervising contractors / etc. The final amount due will be a couple of thousand, I suspect, and I'll be professional every step of the way, and exactly by the book.
Will you please share once this delicious malicious fruit ripens? My landlord managed to take $400 on bullshit charges. We mowed lawn the day before we left, vacuumed and shampooed the carpet, and had informed him our first week that our back door lock was broken, so we replaced it and gave him a key. Those non-problems added $400 to outbill, and he had never added stairs to the 6 feet drop to the backyard, so it was unusable. Duck you, Tyler.
That's nice. My slumlord landlord sent me a bill for $1,200 for paint from my security deposit, and when I looked up the company it was registered under his own name. There was nothing wrong with the paint.
Did you have to pay it?